So today, Kevin's going to take us through how he successfully crowdfunded some projects. And we're going to have about a 15, 20 minutes for a presentation, and then write down your questions as he goes. We'll have time at the end for questions with Kevin. So Kevin, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so I'm going to power through this because there's a lot of information that I'm trying to condense into 20 minutes. But just for a little context, yeah, I've had some success with crowdfunding. The first time I raised $33,000 for a photo project. And then the second time I was able to raise $45,000 for a film. So I guess right off the bat, if you're thinking about doing a crowdfunding campaign, the first thing that three questions that I think you should start off with to see if it's a good fit. And the first is, how comfortable are you asking people for money? And obviously you think, yeah, I'm going to do a crowdfunding campaign. Of course, I'm willing to ask people for money, but it's very, very difficult. I've done it twice. And when I say ask people for money, I mean, like, you have to directly ask people for money. Anne has supported both my crowdfunding campaigns. And I think the first time I was very much more aggressive, where I was like, hey, can you give me $5? That's always my ask, because $5 is small enough that I feel comfortable doing it, but also people generally tend to donate more than that. But the first time around, I was asking people, I think 3 times was my ask. I would do it 3 times in an email. Sometimes they would never respond, other times they would. But you have to really, again, be comfortable asking people for money. And if that's something that you think you might not be able to do, then the crowdfunding campaign will probably not be as successful. And then the second thing that I really try to stress for people is that you really have to actually a lot of people have asked me for advice on crowdfunding, and I think where they fail is they're not approaching it correctly. I think a lot of times people think that having a great idea is enough, and that they're going to put it onto one of these platforms, and the platform is going to be the source of their funding. Specifically, more generally, they think the internet will be the source of their funding, and that's enough. But actually, crowdfunding is a way, the crowdfunding platform isn't the source of your funding. It's your existing network, right? The people that you already know. So the crowdfunding platform is just a way to activate that network. So if you know, like, only 5 people, then you may not be able to raise $10,000, right? So you really have to kind of I think that's where most projects fail, is they think it's just enough to have a really great idea. But no, it's really, you have to have a big network, and the platform is the way to activate that network. And so you may be asking, well, so why even use a crowdfunding platform? Why don't I just ask my friends to Venmo me money? The reason why crowdfunding platforms are a success is because they're able to build an excitement around an idea, right? You could just I could just call up Anne and my buddy Greg and my buddy Ben and ask them to Venmo me $5. But the idea of a crowdfunding platform is that it's a team effort, and you're able to see it through kind of as the campaign gets closer and closer to its goal. And then the third kind of thing that I want to kind of stress upon all of you is that, really, you have to be in it for the long haul. It's a very stressful process. I've done crowdfunding campaigns. It's usually about a month. And yeah, you just have to be willing to, it's not just you launch it and then you let it kind of go on its own. You really have to be pushing your crowdfunding campaign for all that time. So it's a lot of work. So of all those 3 things you say are okay with you, I'm going to basically, the way this is going to work is I'm going to kind of basically give you a step-by-step on how to launch a crowdfunding campaign. It's going to be very, very simplistic, but it's meant to be very simplistic and also very obvious, because a lot of times I think some of these steps may seem so obvious that people don't give it enough thought, and then they make some mistakes that will actually, I think, doom them in the long run. And then we'll end it by, I'll give you a case study of my most recent crowdfunding campaign. So you'll see the actual numbers that show, like, what I'm talking about actually makes sense. So I'm going to quickly share my screen. I can share it, right? And do that.
Yes. Yep.
There you go. Slideshow. Oh. Can you all see that slideshow?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So let's walk you through. First off, just for some clarification, and can you, because I don't have I actually have my clock right here. There are kind of 3 types of projects that kind of work for a crowdfunding campaign. If you're an entrepreneur and say you want to basically create a board game, but you don't have the funding to do that, you can essentially use a crowdfunding campaign to get some seed money to build the prototypes. Essentially, you're guaranteeing the sale before you actually produce the product. So if I'm like trying to create a board game and I want to raise $10,000 and the reward for donating $20 is that you get the board game, well, basically you're kind of it's kind of like pre-sale, right? And the way that production works, you're able to the more you produce, the less the cost. So like for that $20, I'm actually able to produce like 5 board games. And so I give you your board game and then I can sell the rest. That is very clear in the sense that like the reward that your backer is giving you is kind of equivalent to what they're receiving. What I've done, the second classification is more as an artist. So someone who has basically funded a photo project in a film. So when backers donate, they're not getting any ownership in the film, right? And they're not even getting like a film ticket. It's more so they want to support the idea, right? Because they like the idea. So for example, for my last campaign, when people donated $50, they got a postcard. So there's no value. There's no that it's not the same as the first, which is more kind of you're getting what you're donating for. And then the third is basically like a GoFundMe where like my dog is sick and I need money and I need help I need help raising that. So all 3 of those speak to each other. But I just wanted to say that because I'm speaking very much from the standpoint of an artist. So basically I am, it's a little bit different from if I was an entrepreneur and trying to essentially like build a prototype for something. But so the very first step, again, it's very basic, is to determine your goal, how much money you need to raise. And basically you need to ask yourself 2 questions. And how much do you need to raise? Like, how much do you need to make that board game? Say it's $10,000. I'm just going to keep on saying board game because it's an easy thing for me to say. So say I want to make a board game, and in order to produce this board game, I need to raise $10,000. That's how much I need to raise. But the second question you need to ask is, how much can I raise? So this is a little bit more trickier, right? So like, again, this is kind of more an assessment of your network, right? So if you need to raise $10,000 to produce this board game, but you think you can only raise $8,000 based on how many people you know, that's okay. You can still do a crowdfunding campaign, but you have to be mindful of the fact that the last 2,000, you'll have to figure out how to make up that deficit, either through your own financing or through a loan, whatever. But just ask these 2 questions. And so when you're thinking about how much you think you can raise, again, this is kind of a very honest assessment of how big your network is, how many people you know. And this is, I think, where a lot of people fail. If you don't know a lot of people, you shouldn't be asking to raise $100,000 because it's just not going to work. Unless the only caveat is, those rare cases where a crowdfunding campaign goes viral and the internet rewards you with lots of money. That's a workshop on its own. I don't know how to make things go viral, but like from my own perspective, right? Like you have to really ask, how big is my network? And so when you're asking this question, think of it in 2 parts. How big is my primary network? So like for example, who, like I know Anne, like I see Anne on a regular basis. She's in my primary network. I have a coworker who's in accounting. I know them. I have their email. They're my primary network. These are the people that I directly know. And so if you know a lot of people, then yeah, you can probably ask to raise a lot of money. But your secondary network is as important. So your secondary network is basically everyone that Anne knows. So Mark, I don't know you, but Anne knows you. So you're in my secondary network. Mm-hmm. And that's going to be key because essentially you're going to max out eventually on your primary network, and you're going to need your secondary network to share your crowdfunding platform or your crowdfunding campaign. So like if you know 5 people, that's not a lot of people. But if one of those people is Elon Musk, who has a really large network, then yeah, maybe you can try to raise $10,000, right? So try to get a sense of how much you think you can raise. So say like, I need to raise $10,000. I think I can raise $7,000. So my strategy is always to go halfway in between and try to push myself to raise, $8,500, right? So that's how I've done it. That's how I've kind of assessed, what that goal is. And then once you got your goal, the next step is to pick a platform. So I'm sure there are many different platforms you can use: Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Seed and Spark, which is more geared towards films, GoFundMe. There's a whole list out there, but the key is you have to see what model they use. So all these platforms use different models. So the all or nothing model is what I've done each time, because I've done a Kickstarter. Both times I've done a crowdfunding campaign. Sorry. And the all or nothing model is pretty, it is what, how, so basically if I set a goal of raising $10,000 and in 30 days, and in 30 days, I'm only able to raise $9,999, then I lose it all, right? I don't get it, right? And that's an all or nothing model. You have to reach your goal and able to raise the funds. So the downside is it's very stressful, because you run the chance of spending all this time working on something and not reaching that goal. And that's very disheartening, but I think the benefit of it is, and the reason why I choose this model is because it allows you to raise more money than I think you normally would be able to raise. Because if you're at $8,000 and you're only $2,000 away and you only have 3 more days, in my experience, your community will step up and they'll make sure you cross the finish line, because they don't want you to see you lose that $8,000. So either they will like increase their donation, or again, they'll like promote your crowdfunding campaign through their network. But it's just, in my experience, I've been able to raise more money, I think, than if I would have done the other model, which is you get what you get model, which is basically you set a goal of $10,000 and you only are able to raise $2,000 in 30 days. And that's fine. That's what you get, because there's no consequence. And then the hybrid model basically is a combination of the two, which you can kind of figure out. Just as a caveat, every platform has different fees. So that's something to consider when you're thinking about which platform to use. And also be very mindful that crowdfunding funds most likely will be taxable. I'm not going to give you tax advice. You can ask your accountant, but that's something to keep in mind, because that's a cost that is going to take away from the funds that you actually received. So the next step is to build your campaign. Again, these are very simple, but I think just getting it right can go a long ways. Make your campaign video. It's important, I think, to keep it short. I would say keep it under 3 minutes. It's important for you to be on camera, talking directly to the camera, directly asking for money, right? And also, you want to give them a sense of what they're supporting. So for me, for example, in making a film, I showed a few clips of my film. If you're doing like a gardening project, showing them what they're actually funding. And as much as you can, it's important to kind of broaden your message. So my film is about my family, but also is about my Asian American identity. So I made sure to kind of talk about that in my video. The next step is to determine your rewards and your reward levels. Again, keep it simple. Don't have a whole bunch of different tiers. I think my last campaign, I only had 4. They could donate whatever they wanted. They could donate $25 and they got a thank you on social media, $50 and they got a postcard, and then $100 and they got a name and credit. They got a thank you credit and a thank you in the credits of my film. So like, keep it simple. You could try to keep on going. People will donate more. The highest that I got was $1,000. For a few people donated that, and if they want to, they'll donate that. They don't need to see that listed in the tiers. Again, you want to keep it as simple as possible. And then the next step is to determine the duration of your campaign. This is key. I think a lot of times people think if they make it longer, it will increase their odds of being successful, but that's not the case, because every campaign has a cycle. The beginning and the end are has the most excitement, and then the times when you'll get the most donations. The middle is basically just like kind of this dry spell. So if you make your campaign 2 months instead of, for me, the magic number is 30 days. If you make your campaign 2 months, you're just extending that dry spell. So it doesn't actually, in my opinion, help you reach your goal. It just like prolongs your suffering and your stress. So I would say, keep it 30 days max. My last one was 33. So that's kind of, I broke my own rule. But yeah, like people aren't going to be excited about your campaign the entire time. The middle is kind of this desert, and just, it'll trust me, you want to keep it short. The next step is to build and organize your network. So literally, who do you know, and then classify them. So what I've done, and this is the most tedious part, is that I've gone through my emails and I've made a list of everyone who I had emails with, their email information. And then I classify, again, like Anne is someone I see on a regular basis, so she's a close contact. And then I go through and make a list of people, again, that are more acquaintances who I talk to them occasionally. And then there's the people that like I haven't talked to in years. And when they receive my email, it'll be the first time they're hearing from me, and I'll be asking them for money. So like, that's just the way it works. works out. In order to kind of prevent that awkwardness, I do reach out to people. I think a good way to do that is to ask for feedback on your idea and be like, hey, Anne, I'm thinking about doing this crowdfunding campaign. Like, what are your thoughts? Just so that the first time you're talking to them, it isn't necessarily an ask. That's really, really helpful. Just make that list and then launch your campaign. So this is like again, one of the most important things is that you have a big launch, and because there's this thing called the 20% rule, and I don't know what the science is behind it, but it seems to work. So basically, I went through one of the crowdfunding platforms, and they give all of their raw data, essentially of everything that they've launched. So of all the campaigns that have ever launched on this platform, I think there are like 500,000. 60% of them fail. So that's not very high odds. Like right out of the gate, you only have about a 40% chance of succeeding, right? So that's not that high. It's just the way it works. Of all those projects, 60% fail. But of the projects that reached at least 20%, over 20% of their goal. So like say I'm trying to raise $10,000 and I am able to reach $2,000.01. So I'm over that 20% rule. My odds of succeeding double. So you have a 78% chance of succeeding if you're able to reach that 20%. And the reason why, in my opinion, is because people want to bet on a winning horse, right? We've all like reached those campaigns that are trying to raise $100,000 and they only have $5. And you're like, oh, like I'm not going to support this. Like this isn't going anywhere. But if you see someone trying to raise $10,000 and they already have $2,000 in the pocket and they have like 100 backers, it's like, all right, I want to be a part of this. It's like, just like, I'm not a sports person. I hate sports. I only like figure skating and rock climbing, but I'm from Portland. So whenever the Blazers are in the finals, I was like, oh yeah, go Blazers, because they're winning, right? You want to have that, you want to be a part of that energy, right? So that's why launches are so important, because you want to hit that 20% as soon as you can. Because again, the moment you reach that 20%, your odds of being successful almost double. And that's really, really key. Again, especially if you're doing an all or nothing model, because people are going to want to see you succeed. They don't want to see you lose the money that you've already raised. And then just finally, like, keep up the momentum. Like really just like, you can't just launch it and think that that's enough. You're going to have to, again, like be continually asking people to support your campaign, reminding them, sharing it on social media, all that good stuff. And then eventually, hopefully you'll be able to take it home. So I'm going to talk really quick because I want to make sure that we have time for questions, but since we have a small group, I'm happy to stay extra, but I'm going to basically kind of break down my last campaign and give you some actual numbers so that you can kind of see some of the things that I've been talking about. So during my last campaign, I was able to raise $45,000, how do you say that number? $45,419 from 622 backers across 33 days, right? Those were the numbers.
Did you screen share?
What's that?
Oh, wait, I forgot I was muted.
Oh, yeah. So the average pledge was $73. So that was the average pledge, right? All right. So the most popular pledge was no reward, which means 287 backers, 46% of my backers, they chose no reward. And I was able to raise $13,917 from them, which was 31% of the money I raised. And then the second most popular pledge was the $100 level, right? So 179 backers, 29% of my backers, $25,810 raised. And you see that the numbers don't add up because obviously 100 times 179 is 17,900. People who donated $100, they usually donated more, but that was the reward that they chose. So this is the key. This is the key part. Again, goes back to this idea that don't look to the platform as the source of your income. If you see of all the money that I raised, only 6% came from the crowdfunding platform, so about $3,000. The rest came from my own personal network, and I'll break it down so you can actually see what I'm talking about. So these are the top referrers to my crowdfunding campaign. So direct traffic, this means people who I sent a link to, they clicked the link and they went to my crowdfunding campaign and they pledged money, right? So that's me sending an email to Anne with my link and she clicks on it and she donates money. And then it's also Anne sending a link to her grandma, and her grandma pledges money. So that's my secondary network, right? So of all the money that I raised, 329 pledges came from direct traffic, 55% of my pledges, and about $25,000. So this is my network, right? It's not like the internet. It's not the crowdfunding platform. It's people that I know. The second highest referrer was Facebook. I have about 2,000 friends on Facebook, and I got 157 pledges from Facebook, about 26% of my pledges, about $12,000. Again, this is my direct network. Facebook was the most, I think, one of the top referrer of social media, because you're able to embed links into your post. So people are able just to click on it, and then they go straight to the link, right? The next is Google. So this basically means people that know me, but they don't have the link in front of them. So they're just Googling Kevin Trong, My American, Kickstarter, 36 pledges, 7% of pledges, about $3,000. And then Instagram, which was the least successful of my social media. But you can see I have about 5,000 followers, but I was only able to get 29 pledges, about $1,500 from that. And I think the reason is because at the time I wasn't able to embed links into my story. So what they actually had to do was go to my link in bio, and basically you want to make it as easy as you can. So even that one extra step of having to click on my thumbnail and then going onto my bio was enough to prevent them from donating, right? Because on Facebook, they can just have the link. This one had an extra step. So I think the key takeaway from all that, I think this is the end, is you have to be prepared that again, if you know 1,000 people and you, let's make it more simple. If you ask 100 people to donate, only about 15 or 20 will donate. That's just been my experience, right? If I have an email list of 100 people, only about 15 or 20 people will actually donate. So be very mindful of that when you're kind of choosing your goal. And then also be willing to be disappointed, because some of your closest friends won't donate, and has nothing to do with like how much they believe in you or how much they like you. They just either forget, or they just don't have the time, or whatever, for whatever reason. And also be prepared to be surprised, because I mean, I've had people from that I went to high school that bullied me that have donated to my campaigns. So it's really interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. So that was a quick, I just powered through all of that. I hope that was helpful. I'm definitely here for because we're a small group, so I'd love to answer some specific questions you have about maybe kind of your own experience with crowdfunding, or anything that very quick slideshow brought up. Mark,
that was really good, Kevin. Thank you.
Was it? I mean, I talked really, really fast. It was a lot of information, but but I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm going to stop screen sharing. It's also weird to kind of talk to a PowerPoint or a screen, not to
So can I jump in? Are we
live now?
Yeah.
So okay. So Mike, I listening to you, it's like, okay, yes, there's a well thought through campaign. We had a lot of power in an idea, and exactly what you said, like, this is a mistake, don't do this. We did that. We were like, this is a great idea, this is going to catch fire, and it didn't. We hit those middle blahs, like there was some donations at the beginning, it was feeling good. We did a 30-day campaign on Kickstarter, but by day 16 it was like we were floundering, and it was like, the energy was all leaving the campaign, and we limped to the finish and didn't succeed. So learned a lot about that. In the end, after that, I went and started doing some research, like what went wrong. And I don't know how much of this, I didn't hear exactly this approach, so I'd like to hear your comment on this. Like, one of the things that I was reading was saying, have about 60 to 70% of your funds already committed before you start the campaign. Like people that who are saying, yes, I will donate, or at least have a couple of big donors, have some things planned. Like, I want you to give on, you want to give $1,000, that's great. I want you to give it on day 12. I want you to, like, fill the middle. So that kind of stuff. How much of that did you do in terms of strategizing? Like, who do I already know who's in this before I just launch? Like, am I going into dark space here, not knowing anything? Or do I have a pretty good idea that I can get at least, if you said like my goal is $8,500, I got at least 5,000 sort of under my belt. So that's giving me confidence I'm going to succeed.
That's a great question, because So my answer is because my last project was a film, right? And I think as I shared, like my average donation was like $70, and I was able to raise $45,000. And I tracked other film projects who were able to raise more money than me, like $50,000 or $60,000, with like half the number of backers that I had. So that leads me to believe that they kind of did what you described. They had either like they had already received a grant and that was used as a way to kind of uplift their crowdfunding campaign. I haven't done it to that extent. But what I have done is, again, like in the launch, I've tried to like reach out to really close friends who I feel like will donate and be like, hey, can you make sure you donate, you know, like whatever you're going to donate right at the beginning? Because again, it's important to have that big launch so that you reach that 20% as close as you can. On my first campaign, I was like photographing, yeah, I had like, I photographed an event and they were paying me a couple $100s, and I said, hey, just do that into the crowdfunding campaign instead of paying me directly. But when you do that, keep in mind the crowdfunding campaign takes a cut, so you're actually not getting the full amount. But I do think people they do have kind of like either a grant, maybe if you're making a film or whatever, they do have some funding, and that goes into the crowdfunding campaign because they want to create this air of like success, right? I haven't done it, but I definitely think other people do that. But again, I think it's a trick. It's a kind of a catch-22 because yeah, you're closer to your goal, but because you're using these platforms, then they're taking a cut of it. They're taking the average cut is like 4%. So
That's really high.
yeah, for about 3 or 4%, depends on the platform. But Mark Free, I mean, I think from what I know from you, you have some really cool like space, like community space. So like something that was helpful for me is, for example, like Anne hosted a screening in her backyard, and it was an opportunity for me to get like 20 people together that I didn't all know all of them, and use that as a kind of like an event to kind of basically elicit funds. So like for you, if you have access to like community spaces, or for anyone else out there, kind of utilizing that, and again, like trying to find ways to broaden your network and excite the network that you already have, if that makes sense.
Well, you did several of those kind of private parties, right? How many of those events
Yeah,
did
I mean,
you do?
honestly, so with my film, I raised like $45,000, and I did 26 virtual screenings of a 20-minute cut that I had, and that was key, right? Because I was able to peg it to Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So I partnered up with companies and organizations, and basically I did a 20-minute screening. I talked about my film, and then I asked them to donate. So otherwise, I don't think I would have been able to raise $45,000. With my last campaign, I was starting to like max out at like 25 with like people that I directly knew. And so I really needed to rely on my secondary network, and then also the events to help push me across the finish line. Because yeah, it's just really interesting. I really do believe that if you ask 100 people, only about 15 or 20 will actually donate. So that's not a very high, that's just my experience. And I know a lot of people. The first time I did a crowdfunding campaign, I think my initial like mailing list was like 500. So like it's just the way that it works. And especially now, I think people are starting to get their bandwidth is quite low with crowdfunding campaigns, and also it's hard to push past the algorithm of social media. So the first time I did it, I got a lot from Facebook, but now the way the algorithms work, you don't see a lot of crowdfunding campaigns in like on Facebook, maybe even on Instagram. Like it's hard to push past that algorithm. So you really have to rely on the people you know, and then your secondary network, and then or you may get lucky and go viral, but we can't count on that. Yeah.
Kevin, how big is your email newsletter subscriber list?
I don't have one of those actually, but right now it's quite big because I have like from my crowdfunding campaign, I had 622 backers, which I'm very proud of. That's a lot of people.
That's
And then,
a lot of people.
yeah, and then my last one, the one I did it's funny because the first one I did for my photo project was also about 600 people. So once I start putting my mailing list together, like my newsletter together, it'll be over 1,000.
Okay.
But I mean, sometimes people don't even open up a newsletter, right? Like, so like, it's just like, if people won't even read a newsletter, it's hard to think that they're going to give you $20 unless you are very direct in asking for that.
And what about driving traffic to your own website?
Are you saying sharing the crowdfunding platform on the website or running it on my website?
I'm saying you wouldn't have to pay any fees and you wouldn't have any issues with click here to to contribute.
No, yeah. So you could do that, but then again, like I mean, I don't have this. I don't have the tech savvy to like essentially build something like that on my website and also take the funds, right? I think the key, like the benefit of like a platform like Kickstarter or whatever, is it like, again, it's, if you're able to do this, but they're able to, like, you see like donations as they come in, other people can see how many people have joined, how much you've raised. If you can build that on your website, again, you take away the need to pay a fee. I just don't have that tech savvy. And also the benefit of like a Kickstarter is that people recognize it. So strangers will donate, and because they recognize that, all right, it's easier to donate money to Kevin as opposed to just, donate to a Kickstarter than as opposed to just like Kevin, who I don't know, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, I
there's
get
some
it.
like some idea of like recognizability for that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation. That's great.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Well, let's just wrap up, and really quickly, I'd like to make a plug for Focus. So if you do have a crowdfunding campaign that you'd like to get off the ground, then you can put this in your Focus app, and you can, put a list of the steps to take to achieve that goal. And if you haven't yet signed up for Focus, please do. And this recording is going to be on our YouTube channel very shortly. So Kevin, thank you so much. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah. And if you have any other questions, feel free to send me a message.